Bear cub was stuck in an abandoned well. Filling with snakes, what this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning mist still clung to the ground when Harper Delacroix heard the first cry. She was in her garden, pulling weeds from around the tomato plants, when a sound like nothing she'd ever heard before drifted through the air. It was soft but desperate, almost like a child crying, but different somehow. She straightened up, her back aching from bending over, and wiped the sweat from her forehead. Her baby, little Jasper, was sleeping soundly in his crib inside the farmhouse. She could see him through the open window, his tiny chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. Just 11 months old, he'd been walking for only 2 weeks now. Those first wobbly steps had made her heart skip with both pride and fear. The world suddenly seemed more dangerous when your child could reach things they couldn't before. The cry came again. This time, Harper was certain it wasn't human. It sounded wild, frightened. She glanced toward the forest edge where the old well stood. That ancient stone structure had been there since before her grandmother's time. Nobody used it anymore. The water had gone bad years ago, and now it was just a hazard they kept meaning to fill in but never got around to doing. She took a few steps closer to the forest, listening hard. The sound seemed to be coming from that direction. Maybe a raccoon had fallen in? It wouldn't be the first time. Last spring, they'd had to help a possum climb out using a long branch. But this cry was different, more urgent, more scared. Harper felt something twist in her stomach. She looked back at the house. Her husband, Marcus, had gone to town for supplies and wouldn't be back for hours. It was just her and the baby. She walked a bit closer to the well, her garden boots squishing in the damp grass. The morning sun was just starting to burn through the mist, creating long shadows that stretched across the meadow. Everything looked peaceful, but that sound, that desperate, mournful sound, kept pulling at her. When she was about 50 feet from the well, she stopped. The crying was definitely coming from down there, but it wasn't alone. She could hear something else now, a soft rustling, like paper being crumpled, or her blood ran cold, like scales sliding against stone. Harper knew that sound. The old well had always attracted snakes. They liked the cool, damp environment. Usually, they were just harmless garden snakes, but sometimes copperheads found their way in. And lately, with the unusual warm spell they'd been having, she'd seen more snakes than usual around the property. She inched closer, her heart pounding. The crying grew louder, more frantic. Whatever was down there was terrified. When she finally reached the well's edge and peered over, what she saw made her gasp. A bear cub, no bigger than a cocker spaniel, was huddled on a narrow ledge about 10 feet down. Its fur was wet and matted with mud, and its eyes were wide with fear. But what made Harper's skin crawl was what else was in the well. Snakes. Dozens of them. They were everywhere, coiled on the stone walls, slithering through the shallow water at the bottom, their bodies intertwining in a writhing mass. The cub pressed itself against the wall, trying to stay as far from the snakes as possible. But the ledge was small, and some of the snakes were already investigating, their tongues flicking out, tasting the air around the terrified animal. Harper's mind raced. She needed to help, but how? She couldn't climb down there. The well was too deep, the walls too slick. She needed a rope or a ladder, or... She thought of calling the fire department, but by the time they arrived, it might be too late. The snakes were getting bolder, moving closer to the cub. That's when she heard it. A different sound. From behind her. She spun around to see Jasper standing in the doorway of the farmhouse, his chubby legs wobbling as he took a step onto the porch. He must have woken up and somehow climbed out of his crib. Harper's heart jumped into her throat. "Jasper, no." "Stay there, honey," she called, but the baby had already spotted her. His face lit up with a huge grin, and he started toddling toward her, his arms outstretched for balance. Harper was torn. The cub in the well was in danger, but her baby was walking toward her across uneven ground. She started to run toward Jasper, but then the cub let out a particularly terrified yelp. She glanced back and saw one of the larger snakes had made it onto the ledge. The cub was backed into a corner, nowhere left to go. "Mama!" Jasper called out happily, still making his way across the yard. He was getting better at walking every day, but he was still unsteady. Harper watched in horror as he stumbled over a rock but caught himself, giggling at his near fall. The cub cried out again, and this time Harper heard something else in the distance. A low rumble, like thunder, but the sky was clear. No, not thunder. It was a growl. A deep, powerful growl that made every hair on her body stand up. The mother bear. She was somewhere in the forest, and she'd heard her baby's cries. Harper's mind went into overdrive. If the mother bear showed up and found her cub in danger, with humans nearby, she'd heard stories. Bears were unpredictable when their cubs were threatened. They could attack anything they saw as a threat. But Jasper was still toddling toward her, oblivious to the danger. And the cub was still trapped, the snakes growing more aggressive by the second. Harper felt like she was being pulled in 3 directions at once. Save the cub, protect her baby, or get them both inside before the mother bear arrived. That's when Jasper did something that made Harper's blood freeze. Instead of coming to her, he veered off course, heading straight for the well. He'd heard the crying too, and in the way that babies are drawn to animals, he wanted to see what was making that sound. "Jasper, no!" Harper screamed, but the baby just laughed and picked up speed, his little legs pumping as fast as they could go. The growling in the forest was getting louder, closer. The mother bear was coming, and she was coming fast. Harper's feet seemed frozen to the ground for a split second that felt like an eternity. The world around her seemed to slow down. She could see everything happening at once. Jasper's determined waddle toward the well, his little hands reaching out as if he could grab the air itself for balance. The cub's terrified whimpers were getting more desperate. The snakes were moving with more purpose now, sensing the fear in their midst. And somewhere behind those trees, a force of nature was barreling toward them, driven by the most powerful instinct in the animal kingdom, a mother protecting her young. Then Harper's paralysis broke. She sprinted toward Jasper, her garden boots slipping on the wet grass. But the baby had a head start, and he was surprisingly fast when he wanted to be. He was already at the well's edge by the time Harper was halfway there. "Baby bear!" Jasper squealed with delight, peering over the stone rim. His tiny hands gripped the rough edges, and he leaned forward, trying to get a better look. Harper's heart nearly stopped. The well's walls were old and crumbling. One wrong move, and Jasper could tumble in with the cub and the snakes. But then something extraordinary happened. As Jasper looked down at the trapped cub, his expression changed. The delight faded, replaced by something Harper had never seen on her baby's face before. It was like he understood, like he could feel the cub's fear. His bottom lip trembled, and he let out a small whimper that echoed the cub's cries. The snakes below seemed to react to this new sound. Several of them raised their heads, swaying slightly as they tried to locate the source. The cub pressed itself even tighter against the wall, its eyes now looking up at Jasper with what Harper could only describe as hope. Harper finally reached the well, scooping Jasper up in her arms. But the baby fought against her, reaching back toward the well, making distressed sounds, Down, down, he cried, which was one of the few words he knew. No, baby, it's dangerous, Harper said, trying to back away from the well. But Jasper was having none of it. He squirmed and kicked, and in his struggle he knocked Harper's cell phone from her pocket. It clattered on the stone rim of the well and then fell, tumbling down into the darkness. Harper heard it splash into the water at the bottom. Now she had no way to call for help. The nearest neighbor was miles away. Marcus wouldn't be back for hours, and the growling in the forest was getting louder. Harper could hear branches snapping, leaves rustling violently. The mother bear was close, very close. That's when she saw it. Movement at the tree line. A massive shape, dark brown and powerful, emerged from the shadows. The mother bear was enormous, probably 500 pounds of muscle and protective fury. Her eyes were fixed on the well where her baby's cries were coming from. She hadn't noticed Harper and Jasper yet, but it was only a matter of time. Harper's mind raced through their options. Run for the house. The bear was faster. Stay still and hope she passed by. Not with the cub crying like that. Try to scare her off? That was a good way to get mauled. Every instinct told Harper to protect her baby and run, but something held her there. Maybe it was the way Jasper was still reaching for the well, still making those sympathetic sounds. Maybe it was her own heart breaking at the cub's terrified cries. Or maybe it was something deeper, some connection between mothers that transcended species. The bear was moving now, lumbering toward the well with surprising grace for such a large animal. Her head was low, her ears back. This wasn't a curious bear. This was a mother on a mission. Harper could see the muscles rippling under her fur, the power in every step. In seconds, she'd be at the well. And then what? Would she see Harper and Jasper as threats to her cub? Would she attack? Harper made a split-second decision. Instead of running, she set Jasper down but kept a firm grip on his hand. "Stay with Mama," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was saying it for Jasper's benefit or her own. Together, they stood there, just a few feet from the well, as the mother bear approached. The bear noticed them then. Her massive head swung in their direction, and her eyes, dark and intelligent, locked onto Harper's. For a moment, nobody moved. Harper could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Jasper had gone quiet, seeming to sense the gravity of the situation. Even the cub in the well had stopped crying, as if it knew its mother was near. Then the bear did something unexpected. Instead of charging, instead of roaring, she made a sound Harper had never heard before. It was almost like a question, a rumbling inquiry. Her eyes moved from Harper to the well, then back again. She took a step forward, then stopped, her massive head tilting slightly. Harper understood. The bear was asking for help. As impossible as it seemed, this enormous predator was looking at her, another mother, and asking for help saving her baby. Harper felt tears prick her eyes. She nodded slowly, carefully, trying to communicate that she understood, that she wasn't a threat. But how could she help? The well was deep, the walls were slick, and it was full of snakes. She had no rope, no ladder, nothing. And even if she did, how could she get past the snakes to reach the cub? They were everywhere down there, and some of them were definitely venomous. Harper had seen enough copperheads on the property to recognize their distinctive markings, even from up here. That's when Jasper did something that changed everything. He pulled free from Harper's grip and toddled to a pile of sticks and debris near the well. Harper had been meaning to clean it up for weeks. Fallen branches, old boards from a shed they'd torn down, even some chicken wire from an old coop. Jasper grabbed a stick, one almost as tall as he was, and dragged it to the well. "Help, bear," he announced, and before Harper could stop him, he pushed the stick over the edge. It clattered down, landing with a splash at the bottom. The snakes scattered momentarily, startled by the sudden intrusion. The cub looked up, confused but alert. Harper watched in amazement as Jasper went back for another stick, then another. He was building something, she realized. In his simple baby way, he was trying to build a way out for the cub. It was impossible, of course. A pile of sticks wouldn't help a cub climb out of a well. But the innocence of the gesture, the pure desire to help, made Harper's throat tight with emotion. The mother bear watched too, her huge head following Jasper's movements. She made no move to stop him, no sign of aggression. She seemed to understand what the baby was trying to do. When Jasper struggled with a particularly large branch, the bear actually took a step back, giving him more room to work. But the sticks weren't enough. They were just falling to the bottom, creating a messy pile that did nothing to help the cub. The snakes, meanwhile, were getting agitated. All this disturbance was making them more active, more aggressive. Harper could see them writhing around the cub's ledge, some of them rearing up, hoods flared. Cobras? No, they didn't have cobras here, but some snakes could flatten their heads when threatened, making them look more dangerous. The cub was running out of room and time. One of the larger snakes was now on the ledge with it, coiled and ready to strike. The cub pressed against the wall, nowhere left to go. Harper felt panic rising in her chest. They needed to do something now, or it would be too late. That's when she remembered the old ladder in the barn. It was ancient, probably as old as the well itself, but it was long. Maybe long enough. But the barn was 100 yards away, and she'd have to leave Jasper here with the bear. The thought made her sick with fear, but what choice did she have? She looked at the mother bear, trying to communicate her intention. "I need to get something to help," she said slowly, clearly, hoping the tone, if not the words, would convey her meaning. She pointed to the barn, then to the well, making a climbing motion with her hands. The bear's eyes followed her gestures. Then, incredibly, she nodded. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was definitely a nod. Harper felt a chill run down her spine. There was intelligence there, understanding. This wasn't just an animal. This was a mother who would do anything to save her child. "Jasper, stay here," Harper said, though every maternal instinct screamed against leaving her baby. But Jasper was still focused on his stick-gathering mission, and the bear. The bear was watching him with something that looked almost like gratitude. Harper ran. She ran faster than she'd ever run in her life, her legs pumping, her lungs burning. The barn door was stuck, swollen with moisture, and she had to throw her whole weight against it to get it open. Inside, the ladder was buried under years of accumulated junk. Old tarps, broken tools, boxes of who knows what. She threw things aside frantically, not caring where they landed. Finally, she got to the ladder. It was heavy, much heavier than she remembered and awkward to carry, but adrenaline gave her strength. She dragged it out of the barn, across the yard, her muscles screaming with the effort. In the distance, she could see Jasper still by the well, still throwing sticks. And the bear. The bear was sitting now, watching him, patient as a guardian. But as Harper got closer, she heard something that made her blood run cold. A scream. Not from the cub, but from Jasper. She dropped the ladder and ran, her heart in her throat. What she saw when she reached the well made her knees weak. Jasper was leaning over the edge, farther than before, much farther. His little body was more than halfway over the rim, his feet barely touching the ground. He was reaching down, trying to grab something, and he was slipping. Harper lunged forward, her hands grasping for her baby, but she was still several feet away. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. She could see every detail with crystal clarity. The way Jasper's tiny fingers stretched toward something in the well, the crumbling mortar around the rim where his weight was pressing, the look of complete focus on his chubby face. He wasn't scared. He was determined. The mother bear moved then, faster than Harper would have thought possible for something so large. In one fluid motion, she rose up on her hind legs and placed a massive paw on Jasper's back. But she didn't push. She held him, supported him, kept him from falling while he reached for whatever had caught his attention. Harper froze, terrified that any sudden movement might startle the bear into accidentally hurting Jasper. But the bear's touch was surprisingly gentle. Her claws, each one as long as Harper's fingers, were retracted. She was being careful, protective, like a furry, oversized nanny. "Mama, look!" Jasper called out, his voice muffled by the well. He pulled back slightly, the bear's paw moving with him, and Harper saw what he was holding. A snake. A small, harmless garden snake, no bigger than a pencil. It must have been trying to climb out and made it higher than the others. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was what Jasper did next. Instead of dropping the snake in fear or disgust, he gently set it on the ground beside the well. The snake immediately slithered away into the grass, and Jasper watched it go with satisfaction before turning back to the well. "More help," he announced, and started to lean over again. This time, Harper was close enough to grab him, pulling him back from the edge. The bear withdrew her paw, sitting back on her haunches, watching. "No, baby, it's too dangerous," Harper said, holding Jasper tight despite his squirming. But even as she said it, she realized something. Jasper's innocent action had given her an idea. If they could get the snakes out of the well, the cub would be safer. It might even be able to climb out on its own. Or at least Harper could lower the ladder without worrying about the snakes attacking. She looked at the scattered sticks Jasper had been throwing down. Some of them had landed across the well's opening, creating a sort of rough lattice. Not stable enough to climb on, but maybe... Harper's mind raced. She remembered something her grandfather had told her once about snakes. They were excellent climbers, but they needed something to grip onto. The smooth stone walls of the well offered little purchase, which was probably why most of them were concentrated at the bottom where debris had accumulated over the years. The ladder. If she lowered the ladder just part way, not all the way to the bottom but just enough for the snakes to reach it, they might climb up on their own. Snakes always sought the path of least resistance. Give them an easy way out, and they'd take it. It was worth a try. But first, she needed to make the well opening safer. Harper looked around frantically, then spotted the pile of debris Jasper had been pulling sticks from. There were some old boards there, wide enough to cover part of the well. She set Jasper down. He immediately toddled back toward the well, but the bear moved to block his path, sitting directly between the baby and the danger. Harper felt a surge of gratitude toward the massive animal. She dragged the boards over, laying them across the well opening, leaving just enough space to lower the ladder. The construction was precarious, but it would keep Jasper from falling in. She hoped. As she worked, she became aware of sounds from the well. The cub was making different noises now, not cries of fear, but something else. Curiosity? Hope? And the snakes, their movement had changed too. They seemed less aggressive, more exploratory. Some of them were already investigating the sticks Jasper had thrown down, testing them as potential climbing routes. Harper dragged the heavy ladder over, her arms shaking with the effort. The bear watched intently, occasionally glancing down at the well where her cub's sounds were coming from. Jasper had found a new occupation. He was picking dandelions and throwing them to the bear, who sniffed each one solemnly before setting it aside. "Okay," Harper muttered to herself. "Here goes nothing." She positioned the ladder over the opening she'd left in her makeshift cover and began to lower it. The old wood creaked ominously, and for a moment she thought it might break. But it held. Inch by inch, the ladder descended into the darkness. Harper could hear it scraping against the stone walls, disturbing the snakes below. Their hissing grew louder, more agitated. But then something amazing happened. She felt the ladder stop, not at the bottom but partway down. It had caught on something, probably the ledge where the cub was trapped. Perfect. This meant the snakes could reach it from below, but it wasn't blocking the cub's safe spot. Harper secured the top of the ladder and stepped back, holding her breath. At first, nothing happened. The well was full of the sound of moving snakes and the cub's continued vocalizations. Then Harper saw movement on the ladder. A snake was climbing up. Then another, and another. They were taking the bait, using the ladder as an escape route. "It's working," Harper breathed, hardly daring to believe it. She glanced at the bear, who was watching intently, her head tilted as if she too understood what was happening. Jasper clapped his hands, delighted by all the activity. But as the snakes climbed higher, a new problem presented itself. They were coming out of the well. Soon there would be dozens of snakes in Harper's yard, some of them potentially venomous. What had she been thinking? This was trading one danger for another. That's when Mother Nature provided an unexpected solution. A red-tailed hawk, which had been circling overhead, suddenly dove down, snatching one of the emerging snakes in its talons. The bird's arrival seemed to be a signal. Within moments, other predators appeared. A fox slinking out from the forest edge, a murder of crows gathering in the nearby trees, even a large king snake that emerged from the tall grass. It was like a buffet had been announced. The emerging snakes, disoriented by their climb and the sudden brightness, were easy prey. The smaller, harmless ones quickly slithered away to safety, but the larger, slower ones weren't so lucky. Harper watched in awe as nature's balance asserted itself. But not all the snakes were leaving. The biggest ones, the ones Harper was most worried about, seemed reluctant to abandon their cool, dark sanctuary. She could see them through the gaps in her board covering, coiled at the bottom of the well, tongues flicking out as they tested the air. The cub was getting restless. With fewer snakes on its ledge, it was moving around more, peering up at the ladder, then down at the remaining snakes. It made a small, experimental move toward the ladder, then retreated. It was scared, but it wanted out. Harper's heart went out to the little creature. She knew that feeling, the desperate desire to escape danger but being paralyzed by fear. She'd felt it herself just minutes ago when she thought Jasper might fall. Speaking of which, she turned to check on her son and found him sitting cross-legged on the ground, the massive mother bear lying beside him. Jasper was carefully placing dandelions on the bear's head, creating what looked like a flower crown. The bear's eyes were half closed, and Harper could swear she looked content? It was surreal. Here was her baby, decorating a wild bear like she was a beloved family dog, while the bear's cub was trapped in a well full of snakes. Only in her chaotic life could this happen. A splash from the well drew her attention back. One of the bigger snakes was moving, but not toward the ladder. It was investigating something in the water at the bottom. Harper leaned over carefully, trying to see what had caught its attention. That's when she noticed something glinting in the murky water. Her phone? No, this was something else. Something metallic. Understanding dawned. There must be other things down there, things that had fallen into the well over the years. And if some of those things were metal, they'd be warm from the sun that hit the well opening every afternoon. Snakes were drawn to warmth. That's probably why so many had congregated down there in the first place. An idea formed in Harper's mind. What if she could make the bottom of the well less appealing? What if she could make it cold? She thought of the ice machine in the barn, the one they used for preserving vegetables. It was old, but still worked. If she could get enough ice down there. But that would take time, and the cub was getting more agitated by the minute. It kept testing the ladder, putting one paw on a rung, then pulling back. It wanted to climb, but couldn't get past its fear. Or maybe it was too small. Bear cubs were good climbers, but this ladder was made for human hands and feet. That's when Jasper did something that made Harper's heart skip. He pulled off his little shirt, the one with the cartoon bears on it, ironically enough, and toddled over to the well. Before Harper could stop him, he threw it down. The shirt fluttered like a flag, landing on the ladder about halfway down. The cub's reaction was immediate. It perked up, sniffing the air. The shirt must have smelled like Jasper, like human baby, like the creature that had been trying to help. The cub reached out tentatively, grabbed the shirt with its teeth and pulled it onto the ledge. "My shirt," Jasper announced proudly, "for Baby Bear." The mother bear made a low rumbling sound that Harper was starting to recognize as approval. She watched as her cub investigated the shirt, pawing at it, sniffing it thoroughly. Then something remarkable happened. The cub seemed to calm down. It stopped its frantic movements and sat down, the shirt clutched in its paws like a security blanket. Harper felt tears prick her eyes. Such a simple gesture, but it had made a difference. The cub was still trapped, but it was no longer panicked. It had a connection to the world above, a reminder that help was coming. But they still needed to get it out. The ladder was there, but the cub couldn't or wouldn't use it. The remaining snakes were still a threat, and time was running out. The sun was climbing higher, and soon the well would heat up, making the snakes more active and aggressive. That's when Harper heard something that made her blood run cold. Voices. Human voices coming from the direction of the road. Her nearest neighbors, the Clarksons, must have heard the commotion. Or maybe they'd seen the hawk diving and come to investigate. Either way, they were about to walk into a situation involving a wild bear, an 11-month-old baby, and a well full of snakes. The mother bear heard them too. Her head snapped up, ears swiveling toward the sound. Her whole demeanor changed in an instant. The relaxed, flower-crowned, gentle giant disappeared, replaced by a protective mother ready to defend her territory and her cub. She rose to her feet, muscles tensing, a low growl building in her throat. Harper's mind raced. If the Clarksons appeared now, if they startled the bear, anything could happen. The bear might charge them. Or worse, she might grab Jasper, see him as a threat or a hostage. Harper had to do something, had to prevent a disaster. "Stay back," she yelled toward the voices. "There's a bear. Don't come any closer." The voices stopped. Then she heard rapid conversation. Were they calling for help? Getting guns? The Clarksons were good people, but they were also practical farmers who didn't hesitate to protect their property from wildlife. "Please," Harper called out, "just give us a few minutes. The bear's not aggressive, but her cub is trapped. We're trying to help." Silence. Then Tom Clarkson's gruff voice, "Harper? That you? You okay over there?" "Yes. But please, don't come closer. And don't bring weapons. It's complicated." More silence. Harper could imagine the conversation happening. The Clarksons probably thought she'd lost her mind. A bear that wasn't aggressive, trying to help it, with a baby around. They'd think she was crazy. And maybe she was. But she couldn't abandon the cub now, not when they were so close. The mother bear was still tense, her attention divided between the well where her cub was trapped and the direction of the voices. Jasper, oblivious to the new danger, had found a caterpillar and was showing it to the bear, holding it up for her inspection. "Pretty," he announced. The bear glanced down at him, and some of the tension left her body. It was as if Jasper's innocent presence reminded her that not all humans were threats. Harper needed to act fast. The ladder wasn't working for the cub. The snakes were still a problem. And now they had human interference to deal with. She looked around desperately, searching for inspiration. Her eyes fell on the chicken wire in the debris pile. Chicken wire. That was it. If she could create a sort of basket with the chicken wire, attach it to a rope, she could lower it down for the cub. It would be like a crude elevator. The cub might not climb a ladder, but it might sit in a basket, especially if Jasper's shirt was in there with it. She grabbed the wire, ignoring the way it scratched her hands, and started shaping it. Her grandfather had taught her to make animal traps when she was young. Not to use them, but to understand how they worked so she could free animals that got caught. The principle was the same here, just in reverse. Instead of trapping an animal, she was trying to free one. As she worked, she kept talking, partly to calm the bear, partly to let the Clarksons know she was okay. "It's all right, Mama Bear. We're going to get your baby out. See? I'm making something to help. Jasper, sweetie, can you show the nice bear your caterpillar again?" The bear watched her work, intelligence clear in those dark eyes. She seemed to understand that Harper was trying to help, or maybe she was just biding her time, waiting to see if these humans were truly friends or foes. The chicken wire basket took shape quickly. It wasn't pretty, but it looked sturdy enough to hold a small cub. Harper found some old rope in the debris pile and started attaching it. Her hands were shaking. Whether from adrenaline or fear, she couldn't tell. That's when she heard a new sound from the well. A splash, bigger than before. Then another. The cub was getting more agitated, moving around on its ledge. Had the snakes found a way up? Harper peered down through the gaps in the boards, trying to see. What she saw made her heart race. The water level at the bottom of the well was rising. Slowly, but definitely rising. How was that possible? The well had been dry for years. Then she remembered the recent heavy rains. The underground water table must have risen. The old well was filling up. This changed everything. If the water kept rising, it would eventually reach the cub's ledge. The cub might be able to swim, but in a confined space with snakes. And the snakes themselves would be driven upward by the water, making them more aggressive, more dangerous. "Oh no," Harper breathed. She looked at the bear, wondering if the animal understood this new danger. The bear's nostrils flared, and she made a worried sound, so maybe she did. Harper worked faster on the basket, her fingers fumbling with the wire and rope. Jasper had toddled back to the well, still shirtless, and was peering down through the boards. "Water?" he said, pointing. "Lots of water." He was right. Even in the few minutes since Harper had noticed it, the water level had risen visibly. At this rate, they had maybe 15 minutes before it reached the cub's ledge. Maybe less. The mother bear was getting agitated again. She paced back and forth, occasionally stopping to sniff at the well opening. Her cub was crying again, the sound more urgent now. It knew something was wrong. Harper finished the basket and tested the rope. It seemed strong enough. But as she prepared to lower it, she realized a new problem. The boards she'd placed over the well opening for safety were now in the way. She'd have to remove some of them to lower the basket, which meant creating a danger for Jasper again. She looked at her son, then at the bear. An understanding seemed to pass between the two mothers. The bear moved closer to Jasper, not threatening but protective. She lay down beside him, her bulk forming a barrier between the baby and the well. It was as if she was saying, "I'll watch him. You save my cub." Harper nodded, tears streaming down her face. This bear, this wild animal, trusted her, and she trusted the bear. It was insane, impossible, but it was happening. She pulled two of the boards away, creating an opening large enough for the basket. The sound of rushing water was louder now, echoing up from the depths. Several more snakes had started climbing the ladder, driven upward by the rising water. Harper tried not to think about what would happen when they reached the top. "Okay, little one," she murmured, starting to lower the basket. "Time to come up, time to get back to your mama." The basket descended slowly. Harper, careful not to let it swing and hit the walls. She could see the cub watching it, head tilted in curiosity. When it was level with the ledge, Harper held her breath. The cub sniffed at the basket, then retreated. It didn't understand. Of course it didn't. Why would a wild animal climb into a strange contraption? Harper's heart sank. They were running out of time and options. That's when Jasper spoke up. "Shirt," he said, pointing at the well. "Baby bear needs shirt." Of course, the shirt. Harper had forgotten about it in her rush to make the basket. The cub still had Jasper's shirt, was still clutching it like a lifeline. If the shirt was in the basket— "You're right, baby," Harper said. "You're absolutely right." She looked at the bear. "I need to talk to your cub, okay? I need to tell it to put the shirt in the basket." The bear tilted her head, then made a soft whuffing sound. Encouragement, permission. Harper chose to believe it was both. She leaned over the well opening, careful not to fall. "Hey, little one," she called down, her voice as soothing as she could make it. "See that basket? Put the shirt in there. The shirt goes in the basket." The cub looked up at her, then at the basket, then at the shirt in its paws. It seemed to be thinking, processing. Then, slowly, tentatively, it reached out and placed the shirt in the basket. "Good," Harper said, excitement building. "Now you follow the shirt. Go on, climb in. You can do it." The water was rising faster now. Harper could see it creeping up the walls, could see more snakes abandoning the bottom, some heading for the ladder, others trying to climb the slick stones. Time was running out. The cub put one paw in the basket, then pulled back. It was scared. Of course it was scared. Everything about this was terrifying for a young animal. But the water was getting closer, and the snakes were getting more agitated. That's when the mother bear did something extraordinary. She stood up, walked to the well opening, and looked down at her cub. Then she made a sound Harper had never heard before. It wasn't a growl or a roar. It was almost singing? A low, rhythmic vocalization that seemed to calm the cub instantly. The cub responded with its own sound, higher pitched but similar in rhythm. Mother and child, communicating across species barriers and physical distance. Harper felt she was witnessing something sacred, something few humans ever got to see. Emboldened by its mother's voice, the cub climbed into the basket. It was awkward, the basket swaying with the added weight, but the cub managed it. It sat in the middle, clutching Jasper's shirt, looking up expectantly. "Now," Harper said, starting to pull. The basket was heavier than she'd expected, and the wet rope was slippery. Her arms shook with the effort. The mother bear watched intently, occasionally making that singing sound when her cub whimpered. Halfway up, disaster struck. One of the snakes, a large copperhead, had reached the top of the ladder. It emerged from the well right next to where Harper was pulling the rope, its head swaying, mouth open in threat. Harper froze. If she moved suddenly, the snake might strike. But if she didn't keep pulling, the cub might panic and jump out of the basket. She was stuck, literally caught between a rock and a hard place. That's when Jasper acted. The toddler, who'd been watching everything with wide eyes, suddenly grabbed one of the remaining boards and pushed it toward the snake. Not aggressively, but more like he was offering a bridge. "Go away, snake," he said firmly. "Bear coming up." The snake, perhaps startled by the sudden movement, perhaps recognizing an escape route, slithered onto the board and away from the well opening. Harper didn't waste the opportunity. She pulled harder, muscles straining, and the basket rose higher. More snakes were emerging now, the rising water driving them out in droves. But something amazing was happening. The predators Harper had noticed earlier, the hawk, the fox, the crows, were working like a cleanup crew. They grabbed the snakes as they appeared, carrying them off or chasing them away. It was like nature itself was collaborating in the rescue. The basket was almost at the top now. Harper could see the cub clearly, its eyes wide with fear, but also hope. Just a few more pulls. That's when the rope started to fray. The weight, the moisture, the rough stone edges. It was all too much for the old rope. Harper could see the strands separating, could feel the rope getting weaker with each pull. "No, no, no," she muttered, pulling faster. But speed made it worse. The rope was unraveling before her eyes. In seconds, it would snap, sending the cub plummeting back down into the rising water and angry snakes. The mother bear saw it too. With a roar that made Harper's bones vibrate, she lunged forward. Her massive jaws clamped down on the basket just as the rope gave way, and with one powerful motion she pulled her cub up and out of the well. The basket fell away, clattering back down into the depths, but the cub was safe in its mother's jaws. The bear set it down gently, then began licking it all over, checking for injuries, reassuring herself that her baby was really there, really safe. Harper collapsed to her knees, exhausted, exhilarated, and emotionally drained. She'd done it. They'd done it. The cub was safe. The immediate danger was over. But as the adrenaline faded, new concerns rushed in. There were still snakes everywhere. The Clarksons were still out there somewhere, probably calling for help or coming with weapons. And she had just spent the last hour treating a wild bear like a house pet. What had she been thinking? But as she watched the bear reunion, mother and cub nuzzling each other, the cub still clutching Jasper's shirt, she knew she'd do it all over again. Some connections transcended species. Some moments of understanding were worth any risk. Jasper toddled over to her, wrapping his tiny arms around her neck. "Good job, Mama," he said, and Harper laughed through her tears. Out of the mouths of babes. The mother bear looked up from her cub, those intelligent eyes meeting Harper's. She made that rumbling sound again, the one Harper had come to associate with approval or gratitude. Then, to Harper's amazement, the bear dipped her massive head in what could only be described as a bow. "You're welcome," Harper whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The bear nudged her cub, and together they started to move toward the forest. But the cub hesitated, looking back at the well, then at Jasper. It still had the shirt clutched in its paws. For a moment, Harper thought it might bring the shirt back. Some sort of gesture of thanks. Instead, the cub did something even more touching. It toddled over to Jasper, who stood perfectly still, his eyes wide with wonder. The cub sniffed the baby, then very gently, very carefully, pressed its nose against Jasper's cheek. A bear kiss. A thank you from one baby to another. Jasper giggled, the sound pure and delighted. He reached out with his chubby hands and patted the cub's head, his touch as gentle as the cub's had been. For a moment, the two babies, one human, one bear, stood there in perfect understanding, connected by something deeper than words or species. The mother bear made a soft sound, calling her cub back. The little one gave Jasper one last look, then scampered back to its mother, still clutching the shirt. Together they began to move toward the forest edge, but they'd only gone a few steps when a new sound shattered the peaceful moment. The crack of a rifle being cocked. Harper's blood turned to ice. She spun around to see Tom Clarkson standing at the edge of her property, his hunting rifle raised and aimed at the bears. Behind him stood his wife, Martha, her face pale with fear, clutching a phone. They must have called for help. Wildlife Control, maybe, or the sheriff. "Tom, no!" Harper screamed, throwing herself between the gun and the bears. "Please, don't shoot." "Harper, get out of the way." Tom barked, his voice tight with tension. "That's a wild bear, and it's right next to your baby. She's not dangerous," Harper pleaded, her arms spread wide. She was just trying to save her cub. They're leaving, see? They're going back to the forest. But the mother bear had heard the rifle, too. She'd stopped moving, her body tense, positioning herself between the humans and her cub. Her lips pulled back, revealing impressive canines. A low growl rumbled from her chest. All the trust and understanding that had built up over the past hour evaporated in an instant, replaced by the primal fear of a mother protecting her young. "That bear's aggressive," Tom said, his finger moving to the trigger. "Step aside, Harper. I've got a clear shot." "No!" This time, it wasn't Harper who shouted. It was Jasper. The toddler broke free from Harper's side and ran. Actually ran, his fastest run yet, straight toward the mother bear. Harper's heart stopped. Tom's finger tightened on the trigger. Martha screamed, and the mother bear did nothing. She stood perfectly still as Jasper barreled into her thick fur, wrapping his tiny arms around her massive leg. "No hurt, bear," Jasper yelled, his face buried in the bear's fur. "Nice bear." "Friend bear." The tableau froze. Tom with his rifle raised, Harper halfway between him and the bears, Martha with her hand over her mouth, and Jasper hugging a wild bear like it was the family dog. Even the cub seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, pressing closer to its mother's other side. The mother bear looked down at the human child clinging to her. Then she did something that made everyone gasp. She sat down, very slowly and carefully making sure not to dislodge Jasper. Her great head turned toward Tom, and she made that rumbling sound Harper had come to recognize, not a growl, but something softer. A plea, maybe. A mother asking another parent to understand. "Sweet Jesus," Tom whispered, the rifle wavering in his hands. "What in the hell is going on here?" Harper found her voice. "Tom, I know this looks crazy, but I need you to put the gun down, please. This bear, she's not like others. Her cub was trapped in the old well, drowning, surrounded by snakes. We worked together to save it. She understands we're not a threat." "Bears don't work with people," Martha said, but her voice was uncertain. She was seeing what they all were seeing. A wild bear being hugged by a baby, not attacking, not even moving. "This one does," Harper insisted. "I can't explain it, but she does. Please, Tom, just lower the gun, let them leave in peace." Tom hesitated, the war between instinct and evidence clear on his weathered face. The rifle stayed raised, but his finger moved away from the trigger. Progress. That's when they heard it. The sound of vehicles approaching fast. Multiple vehicles. Harper's heart sank. Martha must have called everyone, sheriff, wildlife control, maybe even the state police. In minutes, the place would be swarming with people who saw only a dangerous animal near a child. People who would shoot first and ask questions later. The mother bear heard it too. Her head swiveled toward the sound, ears flattening against her skull. She knew danger was coming. Harper could see the calculation in those intelligent eyes. Fight or flight. Stand her ground or run. "Please," Harper said, not to Tom this time, but to the bear. "Take your cub and go. Before they get here, I'll keep Jasper safe, I promise. Just go." The bear looked at her, then down at Jasper still clinging to her leg. She made a soft sound, almost like a sigh. Then, with infinite care, she stood up. Jasper's grip loosened, and he stepped back, looking up at her with adoring eyes. "Bye-bye, bear," he said, waving his little hand. "Bye-bye, baby bear." The cub came forward one more time, still holding Jasper's shirt. It dropped the shirt at Jasper's feet, then touched its nose to the baby's hand. A gift returned. A debt repaid. Then it scampered back to its mother. The two bears looked at the humans one last time. The mother's gaze moved from Harper to Jasper to Tom with his rifle. She huffed once, a sound that might have been frustration or farewell, then turned toward the forest. But she'd only taken a few steps when the first sheriff's car came screeching around the bend in Harper's driveway. Everything happened fast after that. The car skidded to a stop and Deputy Williams jumped out, his hand already on his sidearm. He took in the scene, the bears, the baby, the rifle, and reacted like any trained officer would. "Everyone get back," he shouted, drawing his weapon. "Animal control is right behind me." The mother bear roared then, a sound that made the ground vibrate. It wasn't directed at the humans, but at the situation, at the closing trap. She grabbed her cub by the scruff of its neck and bolted for the tree line. But more vehicles were arriving, cutting off her escape route. A pickup truck with the Animal Control logo skidded sideways, blocking the path to the forest. Harper watched in horror as a net gun emerged from the truck's window. They were going to catch the bears, cage them, relocate them at best, or... She didn't want to think about the worst-case scenario. "Stop!" she yelled, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Two more sheriff's cars arrived, officers piling out with weapons drawn. Someone was shouting orders. Martha was screaming about the baby. Tom still had his rifle raised, but seemed frozen, unsure who to aim at. The mother bear spun in a circle, looking for an escape route that wasn't there. Her cub dangled from her jaws, mewling in fear. They were surrounded. And then Jasper did something that changed everything. The toddler, who'd been watching the chaos with wide eyes, suddenly burst into tears. Not the angry tears of a tantrum or the whimpering of a scared child, but full-throated, heartbroken sobs. He sat down right there in the grass and wailed like his heart was breaking. "Bear scared," he cried between sobs. "Baby bear scared. No hurt, bears, no hurt." His anguish was so raw, so pure, that for a moment everyone froze. The deputies, the animal control officers, even Tom lowered his rifle. They all turned to look at the tiny boy whose grief over the bear's plight was written across his tear-stained face. Harper dropped to her knees beside him, gathering him into her arms. "I know, baby, I know. The bears are scared. My fault." Jasper hiccuped against her shoulder. "I made too much noise. Bears came. Now everyone wants to hurt them." That did it. Harper felt her own tears start to fall. Her baby, not even a year old, was taking responsibility for the situation. He understood, in his simple way, the chain of events, and he was right. If they hadn't been trying to save the cub, if Jasper hadn't cared enough to try to help, none of this would be happening. She looked up at the circle of armed adults surrounding two terrified animals. "He's right," she said, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "This is our fault, mine and Jasper's. These bears didn't come here to threaten anyone. The cub was trapped in our well. The mother was just trying to save her baby and we helped her, that's all. They were leaving when you all showed up." Deputy Williams shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, I understand. But we can't just let wild bears wander around with people's babies." "They weren't wandering around," Harper shot back. "They were leaving, going home, until you block their way." "Harper's telling the truth," a new voice said. Everyone turned to see Marcus, Harper's husband, pushing through the crowd of officers. He must have come back early from town, drawn by all the commotion. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. "I know my wife. If she says these bears aren't a threat, then they're not." He crossed to Harper and Jasper, putting protective arms around them both. "What kind of example are we setting for our son?" he asked, addressing the crowd. "He tried to help an animal in distress, and now we're teaching him that compassion is rewarded with violence." The animal control officer with the net gun spoke up. "Sir, I appreciate the sentiment, but these are wild animals. We have protocols." "Protocols," Harper repeated bitterly. She stood up, still holding Jasper, and faced the officer. "Do your protocols account for bears that cooperate with humans? For bears that show intelligence and understanding? For bears that let toddlers hug them without attacking?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Some of the deputies were looking uncertain now, their weapons lowering slightly. The mother bear had stopped spinning. She stood in the center of the circle, her cub still in her jaws, watching the humans argue about her fate. "I was there," Tom Clarkson said suddenly. Everyone turned to him. The old farmer looked uncomfortable being the center of attention, but he continued. "I saw the whole thing. That baby there," he pointed at Jasper, "was hugging that bear, and the bear just sat there. Didn't attack, didn't even growl. I've lived here 40 years, hunted these woods all my life. I've never seen anything like it." Martha nodded vigorously beside him. "It's true, I saw it too. The bear was gentle." Deputy Williams looked frustrated. "People, I understand this is unusual, but—" "Unusual?" Harper interrupted. "It's not unusual, it's unprecedented. And maybe, just maybe, that means we need to think before we act. Maybe it means we need to be as intelligent as these bears are showing themselves to be." The standoff continued, tension thick in the air. The mother bear took a tentative step toward the forest, testing. Several weapons rose in response and she froze again. That's when Jasper squirmed in Harper's arms. "Down," he demanded. "Want down." "No, baby," Harper said, holding him tighter. "It's not safe." But Jasper was determined. He wiggled and pushed until Harper had no choice but to set him on his feet. Immediately, he toddled toward the center of the circle, toward the trapped bears. "Jasper, no!" Harper and Marcus shouted in unison, but the toddler was already moving. The officers tensed, weapons rising again, but nobody seemed to know what to do. Shoot the bears and risk hitting the child? Grab the child and risk startling the bears into attacking? Jasper walked right up to the mother bear. The massive animal looked down at him, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. The bear carefully set her cub down, and the little one immediately ran to Jasper, nuzzling against his leg. "See?" Jasper announced to the assembled adults. "Friends, bears are friends." He sat down in the grass, and the cub climbed into his lap. The mother bear lay down beside them, her bulk forming a protective curve around both babies. The message was clear. These children, both of them, were under her protection. The silence stretched out, broken only by the sound of wind in the trees and the distant cawing of crows. Then, from the back of the crowd, came the sound of slow clapping. Everyone turned to see an elderly woman making her way forward. Harper recognized her. Dr. Ellen Winters, a retired wildlife biologist who lived on the other side of town. She was legendary in these parts, had spent her whole career studying bears. "Bravo," Dr. Winters said, still clapping. "Bravo to the child who sees what we adults are too frightened to acknowledge." She stopped at the edge of the circle, studying the scene with sharp eyes. "Do you know what I'm looking at here?" "A dangerous situation?" Deputy Williams said stiffly. "No," Dr. Winters corrected. "I'm looking at evolution, adaptation. I'm looking at a bear that has learned humans can be allies, not just threats. I'm looking at the future of human-wildlife coexistence." She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. "This needs to be documented, studied, not destroyed." She looked directly at the animal control officer. "You tranquilize these bears, cage them, relocate them, and you'll be destroying something precious. Something that might never happen again." "Dr. Winters," the officer said respectfully, "what do you suggest we do?" The old woman smiled. "I suggest we do what the child did. We sit down, we watch, we learn, and then we let them go home." One by one, slowly, weapons were lowered. It started with Tom Clarkson, who actually sat down in the grass, rifle across his knees. Martha joined him. Then Marcus sat beside Harper. Dr. Winters lowered herself carefully to the ground, her eyes never leaving the bears. Soon, most of the crowd was sitting, forming a larger circle around the bears and the children. Only a few officers remained standing, weapons holstered but hands ready. The mother bear watched all this with what could only be described as amazement. She made that rumbling sound again, the one that seemed to mean approval. Her cub was playing with Jasper now, the two of them rolling in the grass like puppies. "This is insane," Deputy Williams muttered, but even he holstered his weapon. For several minutes, they all just sat there. Humans and bears, sharing the same space, the same moment. Harper found herself thinking about all the stories she'd heard growing up, about bears being dangerous, unpredictable, something to be feared. Yet here was proof that understanding was possible, that connection could transcend species. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The mother bear stood up, shaking herself like a giant dog. She huffed at her cub, who reluctantly left Jasper's side. "I think they're ready to go," Dr. Winters said softly, "and I think we should let them." Nobody moved as the bears started toward the forest again. This time, the path was clear. The mother bear paused at the tree line, looking back. Her gaze swept over the assembled humans, lingering on Harper, on Jasper, on Dr. Winters. Then she and her cub melted into the shadows between the trees. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Jasper broke the silence. "Bears go bye-bye," he announced sadly. "But they come back." "Maybe," Harper said, pulling him into her lap. "Maybe they will." Dr. Winters was already on her phone, talking rapidly to someone. Harper caught phrases like unprecedented behavior and research opportunity and habituation without aggression. The animal control officers were packing up their equipment, looking somewhat shell-shocked. The deputies were dispersing, returning to their vehicles. Tom Clarkson stood up, brushing grass from his pants. He walked over to Harper and Marcus, his weathered face thoughtful. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I've been hunting these woods for 40 years, thought I knew everything about the wildlife here. But today I learned something new." Martha nodded beside him. "That baby of yours," she said, looking at Jasper, "he's got a gift. An understanding of animals that most of us lose as we grow up. Don't let him lose it." As the crowd dispersed, Dr. Winters approached. "I'd like to interview you," she said to Harper. "Document everything that happened here. This could change how we think about human-bear interactions. That mother bear showed remarkable intelligence and adaptability. And your son—" She looked at Jasper with something like awe. His lack of fear, his instinctive understanding, it's exactly what allowed this to happen. Harper nodded, still processing everything that had occurred. In the span of a few hours, her ordinary morning had turned into something extraordinary. A trapped cub, a well full of snakes, a cross-species rescue effort, and a standoff that could have ended in tragedy, but instead ended in understanding. As the last of the vehicles pulled away, Harper's family sat in the grass where it had all happened. The well still stood nearby, an innocuous-looking stone circle that had nearly been a death trap. Tomorrow, Harper decided they'd fill it in, or maybe put a proper cover on it. Something to prevent this from happening again. Jasper had retrieved his shirt from where the cub had dropped it. He held it up, examining the small tears from bear teeth, the smudges of dirt and drool. "Bear shirt now," he declared proudly. Marcus laughed, the sound releasing some of the tension they'd all been carrying. "I guess it is, buddy, your bear shirt." As they sat there in the gathering dusk, Harper thought about the mother bear and her cub, probably settling into their den somewhere in the forest. She wondered if the bear would tell her cub about the day, in whatever way bears communicated such things. She wondered if the cub would remember the human baby who tried to help, who threw sticks and gave his shirt and showed no fear. And she wondered if, someday, the bears might return. Not in crisis this time, but simply to visit, to check on the strange humans who had proven themselves friends. It seemed impossible. But then again, everything about this day had seemed impossible. "Mama," Jasper said, interrupting her thoughts. "Bear's okay now?" Harper hugged him close, breathing in his baby scent mixed with grass and dirt, and yes, a hint of bear. "Yes, sweetie, the bears are okay now, thanks to you." Jasper nodded, satisfied. Then, with the simple acceptance of childhood, he pointed at the sky. Pretty colors. Harper looked up at the sunset, at the world that suddenly seemed full of more possibilities than she'd ever imagined. "Yes," she agreed. "Very pretty colors." They sat there until the first stars appeared, a family forever changed by a morning's adventure. Somewhere in the forest, two bears were probably doing the same thing, sitting together, safe and whole, under the same stars. And Harper couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. 3 days passed. Life at the Delacroix farm returned to its normal rhythm, or at least tried to. Harper found herself constantly glancing toward the forest edge, wondering. Jasper had taken to carrying his bear shirt everywhere, clutching it during naps and meals. He'd stand at the window for long minutes, watching the tree line, waiting. Marcus had installed a proper cover on the old well, a sturdy metal grate that nothing could fall through. The snake population had dispersed, nature returning to its usual balance. Everything was as it should be, except for the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted in their small corner of the world. On the third evening, as Harper was putting Jasper to bed, he suddenly sat up, eyes bright with excitement. "Bears come back, Mama. Tonight?" "How do you know, sweetie?" Harper asked, smoothing his hair. Jasper just smiled, that mysterious smile that children have when they know something adults don't. "I know." Harper kissed him goodnight, but something made her linger by his window. The moon was full, casting silver light across the meadow. The forest edge was a dark line against the sky, peaceful and still. She was about to turn away when she saw it. Movement, shadows separating from shadows. "Marcus," she called softly, "come here." They stood together at the window, watching as two shapes emerged from the forest. The mother bear and her cub, moving with quiet purpose across the moonlit grass. But they weren't alone. Behind them came another bear, slightly smaller than the mother. Then two more cubs, tumbling and playing. A whole family. "My God," Marcus breathed. She brought her whole clan. The bears moved toward the house, stopping about 20 feet from the porch. The mother bear sat down, her cubs gathering around her. She looked directly at Jasper's window and made that familiar rumbling sound. A greeting, an announcement. "We're here." Jasper was already climbing out of bed, his bear shirt clutched in his small hands. "They came back, I told you." Harper didn't try to stop him as he ran downstairs. Something told her this was meant to happen. The whole family followed him onto the porch, standing in silent wonder as 5 bears sat in their yard like visitors come to call. The mother bear's eyes found Harper's. In that gaze was recognition, gratitude, and something else. Trust, complete and absolute trust. She nudged her cub, the one they'd saved, and it came forward, stopping at the porch steps. Jasper descended slowly, his parents close behind. The cub waited until the toddler was on the grass, then approached. From somewhere in its thick fur, it produced something. A flower. A simple wildflower, slightly crushed but still recognizable. The cub placed it carefully at Jasper's feet, then touched its nose to the baby's hand. "Thank you," Jasper said solemnly, picking up the flower. He tucked it into the pocket of his pajamas, then held out his bear shirt. "You keep this, so you remember." The cub took the shirt gently, carrying it back to its mother. The whole bear family watched this exchange with what Harper could only describe as approval. Then the mother bear stood, and one by one, each bear dipped its head toward the humans. A boo, a salute, an acknowledgement of the bond that had been forged. As they turned to leave, the mother bear looked back one more time. In the moonlight, Harper could swear she saw the bear smile. Then they were gone, melting back into the forest from which they'd come. But the shirt remained, left carefully placed on a flat stone at the forest's edge. Not taken, but not returned either, placed there like a bridge between two worlds, a promise that the connection would endure. "Will they come back again?" Jasper asked, yawning as the excitement finally caught up with him. Harper scooped him up, feeling his weight in her arms, his trust in her protection. "I think they will, baby, when they need us, or when we need them. I think they'll know." As she carried him back to bed, Harper realized that their lives had been forever altered. They were part of something larger now, something that transcended the usual boundaries between human and wild. They were part of a story that would be told and retold, growing with each telling. Days later, Dr. Winters would publish her preliminary findings, causing a sensation in wildlife biology circles. Tom Clarkson would stop hunting, becoming instead one of the area's most vocal advocates for wildlife protection. The well would become something of a local landmark, the site where understanding bloomed between species. But that night, it was just a family who had learned that love and compassion speak a language all their own. As Harper tucked Jasper back into bed, the flower from the bear cub pressed carefully between the pages of his favorite picture book, she whispered a truth she'd only just come to understand. Sometimes the most amazing things happen when we choose to help, even when we're scared. Sometimes bridges can be built with the simplest acts of kindness. And sometimes, she kissed his forehead, bears and babies can be the best of friends. Jasper was already asleep, but he smiled. Outside his window, the moon shone down on an empty meadow that held the memory of something extraordinary. And at the forest's edge, a small shirt fluttered gently in the breeze, a flag of friendship that would wave between two worlds for years to come. In the distance, carried on the night wind, came a sound, soft, rumbling, almost like a lullaby. A mother bear, singing her cubs to sleep, telling them the story of the day humans became friends, telling them that the world was bigger and more wonderful than they'd ever imagined, telling them that sometimes, just sometimes, miracles dressed in fur and kindness could change everything.